You're listening to InjuredWorkerCast, conversations in health and safety and workers' compensation in Ontario, Canada, and beyond. InjuredWorkerCast is produced by Injured Workers Community Legal Aid Clinic and is not a substitute for professional legal advice. For more information on workers' compensation issues, campaigns, and resources, visit injuredworkersonline.org. In this episode of Injured Worker Cast, Tebasum Durani, lawyer at Injured Workers Community Legal Clinic, explores the challenges workers face navigating increasingly colder winters and hotter summers.
Climate change will continue to exacerbate extreme weather patterns, and the risk factors for workers, as well as the need for better protections, will grow. Ontario has experienced a frigid winter thus far, with lower than average temperatures. For many workers across the province whose jobs require them to spend large amounts of time outdoors, this poses a number of health and safety risks, which can range from frostbite to hypothermia. Workers like Margery tell us that having a job requiring long hours, mostly outdoors, presents a whole host of challenges.
The wind chill could be a very big concern. Around here where I live, Ottawa, I've worked out in minus 43 conditions with the wind chill. Fortunately, we don't get too many days like that here, but certainly it can happen with regularity. And so trying to stay warm in the wind is a big challenge, especially if you are stuck doing something where, again, you're required to stay still. Like say installing or repairing fencing or something where you can, or doing some sort of an electrical repair, something that requires you to stay still, especially if it was something like an electrical repair where it required you to remove your gloves.
As we wait for warmer temperatures, Ontario's record-breaking heat will soon pose its own set of challenges for workers. Canada experienced its hottest summer on record in 2023, while 2024's temperatures were higher than average. This trend is only expected to continue, and this means even more risks for workers whose jobs require them to spend a lot of time outdoors, or those who work indoors, sometimes in poorly ventilated and overheated spaces. Agricultural workers, construction workers, couriers, and custodial staff are just some of the types of jobs that are impacted by the risks of heat stress. About 220 Canadians die each year due to occupational heat stress, and approximately 15% of workers who are exposed to heat stress will develop a heat-related illness. These can include heat stroke, dehydration, and longer-term chronic illnesses like kidney disease. For Laura Walton, the president of the Ontario Federation of Labour, these consequences are borne by workers who often go unnoticed.
You have to think about what are the conditions that the workers are in. I'm an education worker. Prior to doing this work, I can tell you, what it's like in September and June for those of us who are working with students in the classroom. But I also want you to think about what it's like for the custodial caretaking staff who are currently on site, for the trade staff that are currently on site. People don't think about them as vulnerable. They often forget that those folks are still in schools because we think, school's closed for summer. It's just shuttered. No, those workers are there. And sadly, a lot of school boards turn off their air conditioning when they are not occupied by students. So these are folks who are doing physical labor, manual physical labor at the height of the summer, emptying out classrooms, buffing, stripping, re-waxing. It's hot. It's very hot. So, bringing attention to, I think, some of the places, I think that when I say, it's hot, people will often think of foundries. People will often think of bakeries. But what's been great about this campaign is really expanding the understanding of folks of where hot workplaces actually exist.
Advocates say that the government needs to do more to ensure better protections and compliance across workplaces. Last summer, the Ontario Federation of Labour launched a campaign called The Heat is On that aims to both educate workers about the nature and risks of heat stress, but also to push for legislative change, including the recognition of heat stress as an occupational hazard. The Ministry of Labour conducted a consultation in 2023 about introducing a regulation that would address heat stress, but so far no changes to the province's occupational health and safety laws have been made. MPP Peter Tabuns, who represents the riding of Toronto-Danforth, alongside other colleagues, tabled the Heat Stress Act last November, which passed first reading.
What we need is a regulatory framework where there's planning in advance so that employers actually put in place the physical and policy framework that protects people. I'll give you an example. I've gone to schools in this riding which are not air conditioned. And if you go to the third floor of some of those schools, so they're directly under an asphalt roof, and they're the top floor, so they're going to get most heat. The heat in those schoolrooms is incredible. And when I talk to teachers, they say it is very difficult to teach, both physically for us as teachers, but also the kids find it hard to pay attention. This legislation would cause school boards and all educators, all employers, to look at their workplace and determine where there's heat risk and take steps to eliminate that risk, either by physically putting in equipment that will keep the temperature down, or in some cases changing work schedules so workers aren't exposed to heat at the worst times of day, or making sure they have equipment and supplies. For instance, making sure that in some places they have vests that are reflective, keep the heat off, making sure that cold water is available, making sure that shade is available, taking all the physical steps necessary to ensure that people are protected, and then having policies where you're checking to see what's going on.
You're listening to InjuredWorkerCast, conversations in health and safety and workers' compensation in Ontario, Canada, and beyond. InjuredWorkerCast is produced by Injured Workers Community Legal Aid Clinic and is not a substitute for professional legal advice. For more information on workers' compensation issues, campaigns, and resources, visit InjuredWorkersOnline.org. InjuredWorkerCast will continue to follow the legislative progress of the Heat Stress Act.